Hi, welcome to the shop. Today I'm going to attempt something that I think may be impossible, but I'm going to have to do a series of videos on some of these planes. The thing that all of these planes have in common that I want to talk about is that they're all iron. There are, except for the wooden knob on this one here, there's no wooden parts to these planes. Some are filisters, some are rabbet planes. They're all different periods. In the back here, I put in some Sergeant and a Craftsman version of these same planes, but most of these here in the forward section are Stanley, and some are a little more complicated than the others, and some are not. I'm going to start off talking about the number 39, just a simple dado plane, and it has a skewed iron in it. Unlike most of these, all of these irons are straight until you get up to the 289 or some of these other numbers. The Sergeant here is also skewed. Those are, whenever you have a skewed blade on these rabbet planes, it's intended to go across the grain, thereby you would consider it a dado plane rather than a rabbet plane. Where the iron is straight across and perpendicular to the base or the sole, then that's for running with the grain. That's a broad distinction between them. It isn't necessarily so that one couldn't be used for the other, but that's the intent of the designs. So I'm going to try to go through some of these with you, and I hope it doesn't get too boring. And we'll talk about what time periods they came in and when they were first manufactured. And we'll try to hit on some of the patents and who designed it, because we have Justice Trout and Bodmer and Bailey and other people that had different aspects of these planes patented because they either made a modification or they designed it wholly. And the other thing I want to touch on is the fact that some of them have these hollow cast iron handles and some are solid but not hollow, and they're still cast but they have a different inset to them. So I want to discuss all of that with you. I've done a little bit of research back here. There's about 6 or 7 books that I've been going through trying to figure out the history of these planes, and I've made a few lists here showing the different planes that fit this category and when they first were offered. So what I did was I looked up in the book all of these planes that fit this category, and I listed them and what catalogs they first were offered in, and their numbers, and then I went on to put them in an order of first appearances. So we're going to start with that first appearance, which is a 48. And the 48, which is a tongue and groove plane, you're looking at the number 49. I don't have a 48, but the 48 was introduced in 1875. And this one here, the 49, which is the larger version, was listed in 1877. And this is the type of plane that I'm talking about here. This is, of course, the tongue and groove plane. And it's the only one of these that has wood on it. That's that wooden knob in the front. They also had these interesting screws, but we're not going to get into that right now. What I want to do is I want to show you this handle, because this is all an iron body and a cast iron handle here. And you can see that it's hollow. And this is what I'm referring to. You can see the hole in the top there. And on some of them, you can actually see the seam of the two-part casting, and some were cleaned up very well. But so this is one that has the hollow handle, and here's one. This is the number 39. I'm going to go out of sequence here as far as the time, the chronology of it, but I want to show you the other handle that I'm talking about. This is, again, all iron cast, but unlike the hollow handle, this has a solid handle with insets on each side that were cast in with information on them. But again, all iron. So that is another distinction that we're talking about. This is another iron one with a different handle. This is the 278. And It's totally different. Again, it's still cast this way, and in some cases you can see that seam of the mold, but again, all solid, no wood. Now, when you get into the later ones, they're also hollow, but they're a little different as well. This one, for instance, this is the 248. This one has an inset here cast into the handle here that's interesting, and that's on both sides, sort of a tapering down to the skate at the bottom. But again, solid handle, and on this one you can even see the grind marks where they took off the seam of the casting. And this one here is, again, all iron here. Hollow handle, but a little different, not that round hole, and it's not hollow at the bottom. So this was all cast as one piece. This is not inset. This is actually milled down to the thickness that they wanted for the skate, but all solid iron. All a little different, all a little interesting, and different handles, and what we're talking about on these all iron planes. On that plane, the number 49 that we were talking about, and the 48, I talk about it being introduced in 1875. Now, I'm going to assume that that's correct, but in the books that I have, and one of them is the 1855 collection to 1898 of Stanley catalog collections, and then I have other reprints of the 1892 catalog, and I have also John Walter's Guide to Stanley Tools, and I have some other catalogs, and then I have the original by Alvin Sellens, The Stanley Plane. This is a great book, and it's a great reference, but it's interesting because in the Alvin Sellens book, he says that the 48 was from 1875 on, and there's a little discrepancy. If you go and you look at the 48, you see that that the tongue and groove plane was available or manufactured from 1876 forward. So there are going to be discrepancies that I can't account for, and all I can do is give you the information that I have. There may be really studied experts on this, which I am not, that will, have the research to be able to say, well, it started at the end of 1 year, maybe a few months difference or something like that. But that's the reason that you'll find some discrepancies in what I'm going to share with you as far as some of the dates. In this case, and also who patented it, who designed them, because that plane is a tongue and groove plane or a swinging fence match plane, 1875 through 1944, and the same in the other information. They assigned the patents to Miller, Charles Miller. So that's interesting, because the question then is, did Miller patent the handle, the body, the swinging apparatus? And that's going to take somebody going into the patent office archives and seeing what the actual drawings are. And that's the only way we're going to know what portions of this plane were designed by whom. So I wanted to share with you some of those little things about it, because there's going to be discrepancies along the line in this. And all I'm doing is giving you the information that I found in these books. Now, this is a Miller's patent number 50 plow plane replica by Paul Hamler. And you see that it has this hollow handle. Now, again, this is a reproduction, but he's fairly faithful to the original. So I am guessing and making the supposition that Charles Miller actually designed this structure and this handle, because it's also referenced in Walter's book about that plane, the 48, which is a similar handle. So let's go with that for now, but there are other people that are involved in a lot of these designs. I think this is probably as good a time as any to get into some of the history of the Stanley company. If you go back to this earlier 1855 catalog, it was A. Stanley and Company before it became the Stanley Rule and Level Company. And this gentleman started making rules himself. And in this catalog, he has two-fold rules, four-fold rules, ivory rules, one-foot rules, bound, different types, and yardsticks, yard measures. So it was all about rules and measurements. So in 1859, the company's name has been changed at some point between those two to Stanley Rule and Level Company. And inside, what they are selling is are rules that are not just A. Stanley and Company, but also Hall and Knapp are added to them. And so those two companies have united and created the Stanley Rule and Level Company. And they again have the boxwood rules, ivory rules, but they've added in here tri-squares, bevel gauges, and some levels, a few levels. The tri-squares are really very pretty and have different markings, and some of them are not Stanley's designs at all. They're Williams patent combination gauges, Stearns rules, and they give really nice descriptions in these catalogs of the pieces that they're doing, including a big section on the Stearns rules, and then into the new levels and plums and things like that. And then as we go through this, we notice that there's another edition in here, and this will be in the same year, but they've added meat tenderizers, steak hammers like that, and patented tack hammers have been added. And so this company keeps progressing as it goes along, and at some point in here they add in different handles, axe handles, auger handles, gentleman's tool handles, the Excelsior line of different gentleman's handles with chisels and screwdrivers and things inside of them. So in 1870 they have, what I did was I listed through here, and I have 1855, the Rule and Level. 59 was a big change to Stanley Rule and Level. 1867, they added the Stearns rules and the hammers and all of those other things. So that's 1867. Now in 1870, the appearance shows up of the Bailey planes. So 1870, now I have a gap in there between 1867 and 1870. We know that around that period is when they went in, but there might have been a catalog or something that would show between 67 and 70. But I think that's 3 years difference. So there's enough room in here to play and say that the Baileys were introduced in 1870. And there may have been a World's Fair around that period, something like that. A lot of times in the World's Fair, they would have expositions on new tools and things like that coming in. I want to read to you a little bit about the Bailey's planes that they're introducing here. And it's verbatim. But these tools meet with universal approbation from the best mechanics. Mechanics at that time were woodworkers, is what they weren't just metal workers or mechanics on cars and things like that. They were mechanics, woodworkers. For beauty of style and finish, they are unequaled, and the great convenience in operating renders them the cheapest planes in use. They are self-adjusting in every aspect, and each part, being made interchangeable, can be replaced at a trifling expense. But what they mean by that is that you have an operation to adjust with depth stops and that sort of thing, rather than having to hit your iron or your plane with a hammer to make the plane protrude, the blade protrude more or less for tuning. So they have now the Bailey apparati to make those adjustments. Both the iron and wood planes are entirely independent in themselves, requiring neither hammer, screwdriver, nor wrench to remove, replace, or adjust the cutter, which is securely, firmly in its place, or may be instantly released, thereby by use of the cam with a thumb piece at upper and end of the cap over the same. So this is the lever cap that we refer to at the top is that lever with the cam at the bottom, which exerts pressure against the iron. Simply turning a thumb screw located on the bed piece on which the plane iron rests, the cutter may be accurately adjusted to any thickness of shaving desired. And that's the depth adjuster that we're used to on the Bailey planes. So that is 1870 that the Bailey planes are added to the lineup of the Stanley Company. And it's a limited number of planes that they've added. It does have the adjustable veneer scraper, but they're fairly the typical planes that we know of as the Bailey type, transitional and all iron. Now in 1871, that catalog had a lot of new planes entered into it that weren't in there before. The Miller's Patents combination plane, the circular plane or compass plane, those are all in there now. And so these add-ons quickly accumulate and create Stanley a larger base. It isn't until 1879, 9 years later, that they introduce the 48 and the 49 that I'm talking about. And those are the first to be seen in the catalog. So they predate all of these other ones that have been added in. So let's get back to where we were. Interesting things though. The next of the ones with the hollow handles that we're talking about to show up was the 50 in 1884. And let me bring it in so you can again see the handle. And keep in mind that these hollow handles like this is not an early one. The earliest one had the little decorative piece here. This is called fish scale, and this is not the newest one because later they added wood scales to it, and so there were other variations. But again, you see a hole here and a hole here, and a hollow handle. Now, and all of this part here is all one casting. So that's the simple 50. There are a lot of these around, and I've done some videos on them. This is the 78. It's a duplex Filitzer and rabbet plane. Sometimes it's called a duplex rabbet plane. It was offered from 1885 on, so it's the next all-iron plane that added to that the catalog list. It's 8.5 inches long, and the cutter is 1.5 inches wide, and it's japanned, and it has one spur, a detachable depth gauge, and a detachable fence. It's the fence that makes it a Filitzer plane, as opposed to just dado or grooving plane. And this is an earlier one here, and as you can see, this is that part that we were talking about on the handle. This one, it looks like, has been painted, and that's too bad, but it's a 78 Stanley, and there's two beds to put your iron to. You can have it here or further up if you want to use it as a bullnose. And they've made this forever, and it was a really big hit. And this plane has been sold, I don't know how many times. Another variation of it with the lettering, Stanley 78, and it's a very competent plane. Again, the two different beds, your depth stop here, and your fence. The third version, a newer one, was my father's, and that's why it's got his name engraved in it. He painted all of his planes gray, and this is my go-to plane in the shop because I can't do a lot of damage to it, mostly because of that, but it works really well. So I have 3 78s, and good planes, and they were manufactured for years and years and years, and there was hardly a flea market in the 70s and 80s that didn't have a pile of them there. Now, this is the older 78 that I have, Stanley Rule and Company. It's got the patent marks and circle and everything. And what I did was I set the depth stop here to how far in I want to go. Right here is the spur, and I have that recessed because we're going with the grain of the wood. There's no need for it. And the fence will set how far in I'm going in onto the wood this way. So I've got it set in the back position rather than the front because I don't need it to be a bullnose. and starting on the front edge. And you can see the curl that I got and the rabbit that it's making right along this side. And another one. So that's how it works to make a rabbit. It's on the far side of the wood, so I don't know if you can see it. I'll have to check the camera. But you can see the little strips I'm taking off. So here you can see the rabbit cut. And here's the plane, which is the older of the 78s that I have. And you can also see that there's no depth adjuster on this 78. Originally, it didn't have that. And even in some more advanced versions, it still did not have that depth adjuster. That wasn't added until much later, which made it possible for you to very carefully with that lever there, just push down on that lever with your thumb and advance the iron and the cutting depth. Interesting. This is dealing with the 78 that we were just talking about. The duplex rabbet and fillet stir plane. 2 cutter seats, the front and the back, adjustable fence rod. But this is interesting because it gets into the patents, and the Campbell's patent of 1883 is the convertible cut seat design, and then another one that was reissued, and then Trout's basic patent, and Bodmer's improved construction. And so also Bodmer's spurs. So that's what I was talking about, where there were several people that were involved in these designs. The Type 1 has 2 patent dates in the casting, Campbell's. Cutter is stamped with Trout's 1884 patent date, and this is an important part. It has an early style thumb screw and a Miller's patent handle. So they're referring to these handles as Miller's patent. So my supposition earlier about Miller being responsible for these handles has been backed up a little bit in this John Walters book. It has an early style thumb screw and a Miller's patent handle. Nice to see. The fence and the rod are ambidextrous, meaning that you can take the rod off and you can switch it from the left to the right side. And that's not true on all of these rabbit planes. Fence and rod are ambidextrous. The front cutter seat is used for bullnose work. The fish scale type casting used for the handle, which are some of the ones that I have, you saw the fish scale handles, was 1909 and later. So a cutter adjustment lever, that was added in 1925. So that's the third one, which coincidentally and funnily is the year of my father's birth, and this is the one that belonged to him. So there you go. Another good plane. Now I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to continue on this series with some of these other planes, but I think that there's so much here that it's running long. So I want to thank you for coming and joining me in the shop, and I hope that you'll watch this one. I hope you're watching it now. If you're not, I'm wasting my breath here. But if you are watching it, I hope you'll consider watching the next few installments, and we'll go into some of these other planes. Until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.